Hi, everybody. Welcome into another episode of Coyotes Corner alongside Dave Vest. I'm Luke Lapinski. Dave, first show in a while. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Luke. I've missed you.
I've missed you too, Dave, and I'm glad you said that right at the beginning so we don't have to have that elephant in the room.
We eat dinner together before every game.
That's not really accurate. I would say before half of the home games.
Not
so
true
like a
at
quarter
all.
of the games.
Boy, I'm surprised that you're saying that because it's literally been every game.
Well, I don't go on the road like you do.
Oh, well.
So, off, we're starting the podcast with lies.
Lots of confusion.
Yeah, maybe confusion's a better way to put it. But that explains why we haven't done one yet this season.
That's correct.
Why we haven't done a podcast yet since the season actually started. Dave's been traveling with the team this year, and as you may have noticed, the Coyotes play all of their games on the road this season.
So you're blaming me for the lack of podcasts. I like that. We did not discuss that in the pre-podcast meeting. I would like to point out that your schedule is quite hectic as well. Every time I turn on Arizona sports, regardless of the time or the day, I hear Luke Lapinski on the air. So
That's probably accurate.
I think it's a combination of the two.
But that's how I cope with you not being here and us not doing this podcast. I have to act out in other ways, and that's the way I act out.
You're kind of a big deal.
I wasn't going to say anything. No, so the Coyotes have played a lot of road games. You've been on the road trips, and it's been a hectic start to the season, but a lot has happened. So we're going to try and get through most of it here and catch you up, and then we'll do these more frequently. I mean, the team's going to start playing a lot of home games here coming up. So if you look at where the Coyotes are right now, 6-17-3, so 26 games into the season, it's pretty remarkable. You can just chop it right in half.
Right.
The first 13 games were in October. They went 1-11-1. Since then, they're 5-6-2. What, in your mind, has been, and not even the biggest difference, just some of the reasons for the change?
Well, there's a couple reasons.
Okay.
I want to start with goaltending. The Coyotes had some problems in net in October. That's been well documented, and that situation was addressed during a road trip when the team was in New Jersey when it acquired Scott Wedgwood to be the backup to Antti Raanta. And I'm bearing the lead here because I haven't mentioned that Antti Raanta missed a lot of time because of injury.
It's good journalism. Always bury the lead.
Thank you, Luke.
Okay.
So Antti Raanta came back, and not coincidentally, the Coyotes were much more competitive. And I also throw Scott Wedgwood into that equation because he was much more reliable in net when Antti Raanta was not.
Yeah, the New Jersey game, I want to say, was the 11th game of the season, and that's when they got Wedgwood over here. And I thought, I still to this day think that was one of the better games they played. They ended up not even getting a point out of it, but there was a stretch there at the beginning of the season where a lot of those losses were one-goal losses, or they were one-goal losses that turned into two-goal losses with 10 seconds left and an empty net goal. But in terms of just Rick Tocchet evaluating his team, they were in a lot of those games, and I don't know exactly who to give the credit to. I think it's probably a group of people. Rick Tocchet, his coaching staff, and the leadership among the players in that room for not getting so discouraged after that stretch. It's one thing, you start out with all these new players, and you've got some rookies, you've got new pieces, new coaches, and a new system that everybody's learning. And if you're just going out there and getting hammered every game, you're like, okay, this is frustrating, we'll start to get better. But they weren't getting hammered every game. There was like maybe 2 or 3 games in there that they weren't in with 2 minutes left. And that's a good sign, but it's also easier to get discouraged because you sit there and you think, we're doing everything we're supposed to be doing. We're not getting any bounces. We've seen them get bounces lately, too. But I think the biggest thing is that they found a way to legitimately maintain positivity, not just say it, but actually show it on the ice. And that's how, in my mind, that's why things ultimately turned around. Goaltending, too, certainly. Any team loses their number one goalie, they're gonna have to adjust. And the Coyotes were scrambling for a while there.
Okay, and here's also a big key to what has happened here and a key to the turnaround. The Coyotes went on that trip back to Eastern Canada. It started in Winnipeg, and the Coyotes lost that game at Winnipeg, and it was very humbling to the group. So much so that they had a big meeting after it, and all the players spoke out about what was happening and what was going wrong. That happened on a Friday afternoon in Montreal. I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly what day it was.
It happened between the win. So that must have been Wednesday, I believe. The Montreal game was a Thursday.
Wednesday afternoon.
Okay.
Not important.
No.
The meeting was important.
Yes.
And during that meeting, the players all spoke out about what was happening and, more importantly, what was going to happen. The meeting worked. because after that, the Coyotes won the next 3 games on the road in very challenging environments.
All against playoff teams.
At
Former
Montreal,
playoff teams.
At Toronto, at Ottawa. 3 wins. So that meeting worked. And I think it was a huge turning point in the season. And what's going to happen here over the next 2/3 of the season plus change. I like those meetings.
Were you you weren't invited?
I was not invited, and I've asked for details about what was said and was politely dismissed.
They were probably just talking about you for an hour. I mean, let's be honest here.
Whatever works.
Yeah. It's, you look at that stretch, and now we can kind of look back and we can say Winnipeg right now is beating everybody. So it's a little more palatable that they lost back-to-back games actually to Winnipeg. There was, you get to the end of October and they were playing better. And then they finally got the first win against Philadelphia, and they had a couple games here or there where they were sort of up and down. They picked up another win against Carolina. Then they went out on that road trip through, it was Washington, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. 3 road games in 4 nights against 3 of the top, 5 teams in the NHL probably, in terms of legitimate Stanley Cup contenders. I thought they played well on that trip, especially against Washington and St. Louis.
Yes.
And there was a thought there, hey, maybe they have turned a bit of a corner now. Like, even when they're losing these games, look, they're losing to 3 of the best teams in hockey. They're going to overtime or the shootout in 2 of them. They're all on the road. It's 3 and 4 nights. St. Louis is beating everybody, and they took them to the shootout. But then they had the 2 Winnipeg games. The 1 home game out of 8 games, it's almost like a road game because you have to fly across the country and back. Like, I don't have to tell you this. So they fly all the way out here to play 1 game against Winnipeg. Then they fly out to Winnipeg and start that next road trip. The meeting was obviously a huge turning point before the Montreal game, and I think just having a full practice before the Montreal game. Rick Tocchet was discussing that so much leading up to that point in the season. You talk to the players, they don't complain about the schedule. And I don't know if that's coming from the coaching staff or if that's coming just from them internally or whatever. This is a young group. They probably don't mind the travel. And I really haven't heard the coaching staff complain about the travel. But the one thing, I've heard Dave Vest complain about the travel a ton.
Endlessly.
I mean, I'm surprised you're not doing it right now. He's just off mic. But the one thing is, when you're traveling that much, you don't get full practices. And that impacts every team, but especially a team that hasn't played together before. It's so simple and basic, and yet it was missing for the first month of this season.
Let's talk about some players.
Okay.
That have impressed you.
All right.
I will defer to your expertise in starting this conversation.
Well, we have to start with Clayton Keller because he shot out of the gate to begin the season as by far the best rookie in the NHL. There are players that have caught up with him in the rookie scoring race. Brock Besser in Vancouver. It looks like that's going to be a pretty fun race to watch all season. And those probably won't be the only 2 guys in the Calder race, but right now they're at the top of the rookie scoring race. I mean, you look at Keller, you see the fact that he's 19 years old. He looks 16 when he has his helmet on. Like, he looks sometimes like he's a kid out there playing against the best full-grown men hockey players in the world. And yet, when he gets the puck on the stick, he looks like he's been in the NHL for 10 years. I mean, it's natural to him. I know he's slowed down scoring a little bit lately, but he's still got 11 goals. I mean, you would take that at 26 games into the season for any rookie. And
he's still contributing in other ways. It's not like, hey, he hit this scoring slump and he's stapled to the bench.
Yeah.
He's still playing among the most amount of minutes among the forwards. Rick Tocchet has not lost trust in him. He's putting him out there in key situations. Players hit scoring slumps. Were we spoiled by Keller early in the season?
Yeah. I'm going to say every night.
Yes.
It's unreal.
But he is he's still considered a key contributor to this team despite this slump that he's on. So keep an eye on Keller. As you said, it's going to be fun to watch him throughout the rest of the season and the competition among the rookies. As you said, there are some other players who have caught him. It's not going to be a runaway race for Clayton Keller, and I think that'll motivate him.
I think it will too. And to put this in perspective, I believe it was his first 16 games of his career, and so that actually counts the 3 he played last year. And you remember last year he was just sort of thrown in there. Let's see what this kid can do, right? Different coaching staff and everything. Let's get him a little experience. And he has said that was great experience for him last year to just sort of know what the NHL is all about firsthand and then sort of tailor his offseason to that. But you don't expect him to put up numbers last year. I think he had 2 assists in 3 games. That's fine too. But when you looked at his numbers through the first 13 or 14 games of this year plus those 3 games last year, and you compared them against the best players in the league right now, Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, even Sidney Crosby, he actually had favorable numbers compared to almost all of them. You know, you go back and I think it was Alex Ovechkin had better numbers in the first 16 games of his career. I'm not saying Clayton Keller is going to be any of those guys. He doesn't need to be any of those guys. But the simple fact that he stepped right in and was producing at a level that was better than Connor McDavid or Austin Matthews. Austin Matthews' first game, he had 4 goals last year. And still, 16, 17 games in, Keller had better numbers. So he did spoil us a little bit. They've moved him around from the right side to the left side. He's
Changed
still making
his line
plays.
mates as well.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stepped on your comment there.
But that's, no, I mean, you actually supported it for the first time ever. It's you know, they had to juggle things offensively, and I think it has worked for the team, but he's probably just readjusting.
Brendan Perlini, he had a slow start to the season. He did not score in the first couple games. Then he was injured. Missed 6 games. He's come back. He's on fire. 4-game goal-scoring streak. He'll take with him on this next road trip. And I wrote a story about Brendan for the Coyotes website today, and in it I noted that he's simply just scoring from all over the ice.
Yeah.
He's redirecting shots. He's skating around multiple defenders and roofing shots. He's finishing one-timers. He's a scorer, and we're starting to see that consistently.
I've said this in the past, I still think he has the potential to be the best pure goal scorer on this team. And I was saying that at the start of the season when he was out of the lineup, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you get this too, you know, people that are just casual fans were asking us, like, what's going on? And my reaction was they're missing maybe their best pure goal scorer, their starting goalie, Jacob Chikrin, Nicholas Jallman. I mean, they were missing like a third of their team and key players. But you're seeing it now. Perlini back in there. He's got that release on that shot. He's got a quick shot, and he takes it. You know, sometimes guys get a little fancy, and they want the perfect goal, and they're passing too much. Perlini, if the puck is on his stick and he has an open lane, he's taking the shot, which I want that to be my goal scorer's instincts, right? And a lot of his goals, like you just said, end up being pretty goals anyway. That goal against Vegas the other night where he sidestepped Nate Schmidt and just goes right in past Malcolm Subban underneath the crossbar, they need him. And they don't need him to score every game, but if he wants to keep doing that, that's fine.
Derek Stepan has come alive in the last half dozen games or so. He's got a point in every one of them. Plus, just beyond that, and we talked about this in the preseason podcast, you just get a sense that Derek Stepan is a leader for this team and that he's a winner. And I think you're starting to see him feel more comfortable in his new environment. I'm not saying that he was awkward in the first month of the season, but it just seems as if now, as we're going along here and he's getting familiar with all of his new teammates, that Derek Stepan is really starting to play like Derek Stepan.
I think he was probably more valuable than we realized the first few weeks of the season. I think he was probably one of those guys that had the leadership in the locker room when you are struggling out of the gate. You got to remember all these kids that are first, second, third year players, they're used to being dominant in junior. They're used to winning more often, much more often than not. And Derek Stepan's used to winning at the NHL level. So they needed somebody, and I don't think he was the only one, but you know, just talking to him during that stretch, he was consistently as positive as you could be in that moment. And I think it's because as much success as he had with the Rangers, they went through losing streaks. You know, he's experienced losing streaks at the NHL level, and he's more importantly experienced how to pull out of them. And I just constantly talking to him, he would say, you know, we're doing things right, and he would specifically point out we weren't doing this right a week ago. Now we are, and they weren't. The biggest thing when you're struggling is don't change what you're doing right. You need to recognize what you're doing right so that you keep building off that. I think Derek Stepan was a huge part of that. Now to see him getting points in all these games too is great. He rang that one off the post right, like less than a second to go against L.A. and they went to overtime. But he's been productive now for the last couple of weeks.
How about Oliver Ekman-Larsson?
I think that we are seeing Oliver Ekman-Larsson now look like the guy we saw for the first 7 years of his career, 6-7 years of his career. We know, I think, pretty clearly what had him off his game last year, and there was a stretch at the start of this season where he didn't quite look like himself. But I also think that's learning the new system, and you know you can't overstate how much of a transition it is for a team to go from the old system the Coyotes were playing to basically the system the Pittsburgh Penguins are playing. And you see it now. Like, they're starting to get it. It's instinctual for guys, for most guys now, where you can't play hockey and think about your next move at any level. At the NHL level, you're done if you're doing that. And they were doing that early in the season. It makes sense because they were trying to completely learn a whole new way to play hockey. And Oliver Ekman-Larsson's, he's at the epicenter of it.
I do that when I'm playing bubble hockey, and it hasn't been going well.
No, you should never think even when playing bubble hockey.
Big news on Sunday. Dylan Strome, who was simply tearing it up in the American Hockey League, second in the league in scoring, despite having played only 15 games. He got noticed, let's just say that, and the Coyotes decided, we'd like Dylan to play for us. So obviously the move was made. Dylan will be at practice on Monday before the Coyotes leave on a 2-game road trip up to Edmonton and Calgary. And I have to say, I'm not surprised whatsoever that Dylan Strome has joined the Coyotes at this point.
The numbers he's putting up in the AHL are ridiculous. I looked this up on Sunday night after he got called up because there are similarities between his career path and Brendan Perlini's. They're not the same player. Don't expect Dylan Strome to come in here and be the pure goal scorer that Perlini is, because that's just not the player he is. But you get this narrative out there now where it's like, oh, Strome, I forgot about him. He's so old. He's 20.
Right.
Brock Besser, who we just talked about, who's challenging Clayton Keller, was drafted in the same class as Dylan Strome. Like, Dylan Strome's not behind schedule. He just happened to be drafted the same year as Connor McDavid. If he's still not playing in the NHL in 2 years, then yeah, he's behind schedule. I understand, he's the third overall pick. You want to see what he can do, but I think even last year, the thought was, let's get him up to the AHL, have him play professional hockey for a little bit, and then see what he can do in the NHL. And if you recall, 2 years ago, that was the thought with Brendan Perlini. And if you look, Perlini started last year in the AHL when he had 19 points in 17 games, got called up. He's been great. Strome, 26 points in 15 games, so technically even better numbers. Now he gets called up. Let's see what he can do.
I wrote about Dylan Strome for the website today, and a big key to his success, and this came straight from Dylan, not from me, was the situation he was in down there. He was playing a ton of minutes for Tucson, and he was also playing on the top line with 2 other first-round draft picks, Lawson Krause and Nick Merkley. But having said that, I don't want too much credit to be deflected away from Dylan Strome and what he accomplished. He was sent down there. He was asked to work on some things, and I spoke to John Chaika, and Dylan worked on all of them. They wanted him to be more confident with the puck. They wanted him to work on his playmaking, and they wanted him to work on his speed. And by all accounts, everyone I've talked to, the coaches down there, I've seen comments from them as well, Dylan took that very seriously. He wanted to get back here, and mission accomplished.
He's approached all this with the right attitude, and he is definitely somebody that you can see it. When the coaching staff or John Chaika or somebody in the front office says you need to work on this, he doesn't take it as some criticism that just destroys his self-confidence. He's like, okay, I'll work on it. That's why I'm here. He's, I remember talking to him in the preseason. He's like, I'm trying to live out a childhood dream. I want to play in the NHL. I want to be, he doesn't just want to be here. He wants to be a legitimate impact player. I think what's interesting about him is you look at every level of his career, when he's moved on from it, he's basically been dominant. Like, I know he was only in the AHL for basically a month, 15 games. But 26 points in 15 games was the best. It was the second highest point total in the AHL when he left, by far the best of any rookie in the AHL, and he had played less games because Tucson's played less games. So points per game, it was the best. I mean, it's not even, 26 points in 15 games is ridiculous.
1.73 per game?
Yeah. And this is his first year of professional hockey. This is his first month of professional hockey. So you see what he did in junior, and you know that we knew he had outgrown that prior to last season. It was just, the rule was he had to go back. We saw him in the World Junior Championships. He was good there. Now we see him in the AHL, and that's a jump from junior to, I know the AHL isn't the NHL, but it is professional hockey. That's different. You're playing against guys of all ages. I just wanted to see if he would be productive. For him to be dominant, sort of, that's encouraging.
Icing on the cake?
Yeah. I don't expect him to be dominant in the NHL. Nobody's really dominant in the NHL, but if he can come in here and be a productive player, that's another piece that I think people sort of forgot they had with Christian Fischer playing the way he is, and Keller and Perlini and Duclair. We didn't even talk about Duclair. He's been productive as well now.
And now I want a piece of cake. So
yeah, I don't know why. You always bring up food during the podcast.
I know we want to move on and talk about what lies ahead, but there's one more player, and you mentioned him casually in your monologue there.
I rehearsed that for 2 months.
A one-man show. I like it.
The people can't see me waving my arms and doing jazz hands as I dance.
Very dramatic.
Not dramatic enough.
Jacob Chychrun.
Yes. There's actually 2 players we need to mention, but go ahead. And I brought them both up in my monologue.
Well, I'm going to talk about Jacob Chychrun for a little bit.
Okay.
He's been out all season, obviously. He suffered a knee injury training in the summer, had surgery, and he's been working very hard to get back. The original thought was that he wouldn't be back until late December, maybe even January. I don't have any inside information at this point, but from what I've witnessed at practice, Jacob Chychrun looks pretty good.
Yeah.
He's been practicing with the team. He's been traveling with the team. Do I know when he's going to come back? No. Do I like asking myself questions? Yes.
I'm glad you asked it because I was going to ask it.
I think we're going to see Jacob Chychrun in a game pretty soon.
It's remarkable, just considering what that he had to work back from that over the summer, and even in training camp, you see him walking around. You're like, you heard Rick Tocchet before anybody saw him in training camp, and Rick Tocchet's like, this guy's not normal. Like, he just heals faster than other humans. Then you see him walking around training camp, and you're like, this guy's not normal. He heals faster than other humans. Yeah, I mean, he's already out there skating and practicing, and I know that he was only a rookie last year, but he was, he was one of 5 rookies, I think, last year or the year before that stepped right in and played the year they were drafted, that played, 70 games or whatever, more than 30 was really the cutoff, and he's a defenseman. Like, the fact that they haven't had him all year and they've gotten better on defense, if they are able to add Jacob Chychrun and Dylan Strome to this roster in the next few weeks, this should only get better. And right now they're about a 500 team. And I'll tell you what, I've talked to a lot of people around the organization, and just from watching this team, I know the record's not great. They've looked like a 500 team this year. They really have. Like, you get a couple bounces, and I know you can say that about any team, but I can point to very specific bounces with this team. This should be about a 500 hockey team right now and getting better.
Who is this mystery player you wish to discuss that was not in the pre-podcast meeting?
Well, he was. We didn't get to him yet. Anthony Duclair had a hat trick the other day. Duclair is making things happen out there. I know he's been a healthy scratch a couple times, but when he's out there, he is quietly a source of offense. He already has more goals this year than he had all of last year.
Yes. Very true. He has 6 goals now, and he had 5 all of last year?
Yes.
Are my numbers correct?
He just looks different this year. He really...
looks more confident to me, much so more lately. Much so more.
So I'm doing the podcast with Yoda, apparently. Star Wars Night was a couple nights ago, but Dave is still in Yoda mode.
Well played. And I'm not your father, Luke.
No, that's Star Wars Night was just a bunch of people saying, Luke, I am your father. The situation with Duclair now is, you talk about Perlini, and I'm sitting here saying he might be the best pure goal scorer on this team. Duclair is just, when he has the puck, he's just so dangerous, and he makes those power moves to the net with the puck. And just like everybody else, he's been learning Rick Tocchet's system. And, there was points earlier in this year where, yeah, I know Duke wants to make a move towards the center of the ice. That's his instinct to try and score a goal, but the defense was all out of place behind him, and they didn't have Ranta, so if you turn the puck over in front of the other team's goal, 5 seconds later it's in your net. It's not supposed to go like that. Like, if you're going to turn the puck over, at least turn it over by the other team's goal. It shouldn't really hurt you. It was hurting the Coyotes earlier this year, and you can see now he makes the smarter play. He'll go into the corner if he knows the rest of his line mates are still changing and they're tired, so they don't get exposed, but he hasn't lost his ability to get to the net with the puck. That's, again, another player that I almost feel like got lost in the shuffle because you didn't know what to expect after last year, and that's fair. But if he's going to score 2, now all of a sudden you've got 5, 6, 7 different guys that can put up 2 goals any night.
Okay, Luke. Good stuff.
Thank you.
I enjoyed that, especially my parts.
Yeah. They were the only part I would edit out.
Let's talk about the future.
Oh,
and I hope there's some sound effect that Doug Cannon can throw in there that makes it sound like we're traveling in space.
I think even if Doug Cannon had a sound effect he could put in, the fact that you just asked for it pretty much assures he's not going to put it in.
Another road trip this week. How about that?
Yeah, just a short one, though.
Yes, 2 games in Western Canada, right due north of here.
Yep.
First stop
I don't think you just pointed north, did you?
I don't know. I pointed at you.
You pointed straight up into the sky. That's what you did. Yeah, Edmonton and Calgary.
And Calgary.
Yeah. So here we go. Connor McDavid and Johnny Gaudreau.
Mike Smith, too.
Mike Smith as well.
Don't bury the lead again.
Well, you taught me that, right?
So 2 games on the road and then back home. And I don't want to get crazy here, but I think there's going to be some home games in the future. Am I seeing that correctly, or am I not? Please tell me.
It is weird looking at the schedule and seeing the games that are in red boxes instead of the dark, like charcoal-colored boxes. Yeah, not only are the Coyotes going to get a couple home games coming up, What?
Wait,
December?
hold on. I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
Okay.
Because after this road trip, there's one home game against New Jersey.
Yes.
And then it's up to Las Vegas, and then 3 more road games.
Yeah.
So let's...
Got to get to December 10th.
December 10th.
That's the cutoff date that's been talked about here for about a month now.
That is my Christmas this year.
So after December 10th, just basically home for a month and a half.
Yes.
I mean, the schedule, and we probably should at least address this. It was brought up to me earlier, 3 or 4 weeks into the season. Somebody said to me, "I've never seen a schedule like this." And I was like, "Okay, every year, it's like in football. Every year, we're like, oh, I can't believe there's this many injuries. This has to be the most ever." Then I looked at the schedule and realized the Coyotes are on the road all the time. They really, and not just on the road, on the East Coast playing games. The payoff starts December 11th, basically. For a month and a half, the Coyotes have breaks between games, and they play mostly home games. Really to the end of January, basically to the All-Star break.
Yes. I can't wait. I mean, I could go on with some funny stories about not knowing what day it is or what city I'm in. There were 2 instances where I knocked on the wrong door, thinking it was my door. The key wasn't working at the hotel.
But that has nothing to do with the traveling. That wasn't even this season. That was the summer, right?
Okay, that was during the summer. Okay, but enough about the traveling and enough about complaining about the traveling, which we're the only ones doing that, as we've noted. Let's talk a little bit about Paul Bissonnette, because
Let's do it.
Paul is traveling with the team, and he's been a lot of fun. I'm assuming that the people that are listening to this have also been listening to Paul and Bob Heathouse and yourself and Todd Walsh on the Coyotes radio network, and also watching the Paul Bissonnette videos that are all over the team's social media platforms, specifically the Road Trippin' with Biz features. I know you like them. Let's talk a little bit about them.
This is what you we're hoping when you bring in Paul Bissonnette, when you bring him into the mix. I mean, it's great. I get to work with him every night. He was, I think I've told the story on the podcast before, but the first time I ever interviewed him, which was one of my first years ever with the Coyotes, after the interview, I was like, hey, guess what? You're going to have a career basically doing what I'm doing if you ever want it when you're retired. And here we are all these years later, and he does. And he's great to work with. He keeps Heater on his toes, which is, I mean, that mix, it's great on the radio. It's even better in person to see the two of them, because you couldn't have 2 more different personalities,
right?
Which is just so entertaining, especially off mic. But yeah, I mean, the Road Trippin' with Biz is, to me, exactly why you bring in a guy like that.
He's done one with Derek Stepan. He's done one with Zach Ronaldo, and he's done one with
Anthony Duclair in Montreal.
Duclair. I can give you a spoiler alert and tell you the next one is with Max Domi, and it was filmed in Toronto, and it's coming out soon. And as someone who was there, sort of, behind the scenes, I can tell you it's going to be pretty good. So
you kept like photobombing and walking through the back.
I did. I'm not allowed on the set for some reason.
Well, I think we know why.
But look for that on the social media platforms. What else you got? I think we've come to the end.
Well, we did skip over 2 quick notes. The special teams has been another major turning point for this team, in the sense that when they went on that 3-game winning streak, and they've won now 4 of 6, and they've looked a lot better, and they're getting results. Earlier in the season, when you sit there and you say they lost this game by a goal, why aren't they winning any of these? Well, they weren't doing anything on the power play. They look a lot better on the power play. That 3-game winning streak was in the middle of a stretch where they had 6 power play goals in 5 games. But I'll flip it around and say the penalty kill has been consistently really good now for a month.
Yes.
And we're talking like close to a 90% kill rate for a month. That's, I mean, if you could keep that up all year, that's elite.
Yeah, that is definitely something that stood out, especially during that trip back east against the Montreal, Torontos, and Ottawas. I believe the penalty kill was perfect in all 3 of those games. And it's just something that the Coyotes recognized as a problem, as you say, early in the season, and it was addressed. And, I think if we're going to sustain any of this momentum that's been generated over the past couple of weeks, or in the month of November, as we pointed out, I think that's going to be a key. And a big key is 5-on-3s. That's something that has not been going well.
Yeah.
I believe the Coyotes are 0 for 8.
It's amazing they've drawn 8 5-on-3s already.
And granted, not all of them are 2 minutes long.
Yeah, some of them are 15 seconds.
Right.
But still, 0
for 8 on 5-on-3s. I know that's not going over well down the hall here. And again, I'm pointing. I think I'm pointing at the kitchen.
You said Edmonton was.
Yes,
now you're telling me Rick Tocchet's there. That is something. the fact that this team is able to draw, it feels like they're drawing a lot more power plays than they were even a year ago. And I think a lot of that is the skill and the speed on this team. But when you look, at least for me, when I'm looking at what is most encouraging for this team now going forward, because you said you want to predict the future on this podcast for some reason. They have 56 games left in the regular season. Two of the most sustainable areas for me are the fact that the penalty kill has been good for a month. Borderline great for a month. Again, that's not 3 games, that's like 15. And they've played some good teams in there. I mean, that's counting the games against Pittsburgh and Washington and St. Louis, all these teams. But the other thing is just the simple fact that they do, at the start of the year, they were really reliant on Clayton Keller to score. And so you can say, okay, well, he's really good, but then you can say he's also 19. I don't want to be overly reliant on anybody to score.
Right.
So now it's Keller. Now it's Duclair. Now it's Perlini. It's Fisher. Like, we didn't even talk about Fisher on this show. He's clutch.
Toby Reeder,
Derek Stepan. Like, there's a bunch. There's Max Domi's going to get going here again. You've got a lot of different players that can score, and you're not overly reliant on any of them. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I mean, 26 game-winning goals now in his career, which is ridiculous for a defenseman at this point in his career. They've got different ways they can score. And they have enough of them where if one or two guys goes into a slump, Keller's been in his goal-scoring slump, and they're winning the games now.
We kind of glossed over the home schedule. I want to provide some details for the fans here. Okay. As we did mention on December 10th, that's the start of a home schedule that is quite favorable. There's a 5-game homestand in the middle of December. Starts on the 14th. There's some pretty good teams coming to Glendale. So if fans are thinking about coming to a game or games, let me tell you that the Tampa Bay Lightning, who I know you seem to feel is the best team in the NHL for some reason.
To be fair, because they are now, but to be fair, I felt that way in August, too.
You thought that last year, too.
Well, they were all hurt last year.
They're coming on December 14th. The Pittsburgh Penguins, they'll be here on the 16th.
I didn't say they were the best team last year. I said they would make the playoffs last year. Pittsburgh was the best team last year.
And then on the 22nd of December, the Washington Capitals. So some heavy hitters are coming here just before the holiday season kicks into high gear.
And 3 teams that are only here once a year. So, again, if for whatever reason you've never seen Alex Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby play in person, you need to. You need to. And the Coyotes, they played Washington close earlier this season. They split with the Penguins last year. Oliver Ekman-Larsson tends to play well against Alex Ovechkin. That's always a fun matchup. And Tampa Bay, look, maybe they don't win the Stanley Cup, but it feels like they're going to right now the way they're going. So that's a team you want to see, certainly as well.
No comment.
Nothing. Do you want to talk about the website real quick before we wrap things up?
Sure. I always like to talk about the website. I know.
You've brought it up 3 times. It's been very awkward. Go ahead.
Well, as we mentioned, heading out on the road, and there will be complete coverage of the road trip on the website with daily pregame capsules and recaps and notebooks and all sorts of video Q&As after and before each game. So I just invite fans to follow along on the road trip with the website, ArizonaCoyotes.com.
And
I call it ACDC.
Yeah, I guess that works, but it's more confusing when you put it that way. So holiday season, we'll be doing more of these more frequently. I'll give a shout out to my parents. I know they told me the other day they listen. That's remarkable, and it is the holiday season, so that's cool. I'm sure Dave's parents listen. It's just a great time. I want to thank Doug Cannon for putting this together for us. Dave, this was fun.
It was, Luke.
A lot to talk about.
I missed you.
I missed you too. All right. To all the listeners out there, thanks for tuning in to Coyotes Court.